Hello and welcome back to the France 24 newsroom. I'm Haxie Myers-Belkin and you're watching Eye on Africa. The headlines. Doctors reveal that a child in South Africa has effectively been cured of AIDS. 8.5 years after coming off anti-retroviral drugs, the child remains symptom-free. This as an international AIDS conference in Paris urges the US not to stop funding its research. With 3 South African news organisations coming together to launch Guptaleaks.com, we discuss just how much undue influence the wealthy Gupta family exerts on South African politics. And legal troubles mount for the son of Equatorial Guinea's president. First accused of spending public cash on luxury goods in France, Teodorin Obiang now also stands accused in Switzerland of failing to pay an architect €1 million. Hi again, thank you very much for joining us. We begin with the news of an HIV case that could pave the way for a revolution in how the disease is treated. A child in South Africa born with HIV has effectively been cured of the AIDS virus after just 1 year of anti-retroviral treatment. The child, who's almost 10 years old now, has been entirely drug-free for 8.5 years, during which they were closely monitored for any signs of a relapse. Normally, patients infected with HIV have to stay on ART drugs for the rest of their lives. Well, this news comes as Paris is hosting an international HIV conference. Its organisers insisting now is not the time for the USA to cut funding into HIV/AIDS research. Nick Rushworth has this report.
More than 6,000 experts are gathered to assess advances in AIDS science amid concerns funds are drying up. Conference organisers say lives are at stake. They insist the United States, a major AIDS research and treatment donor, should stay engaged.
Global funding for HIV has declined in recent years. And we know that today major donors around the world are contemplating severe cuts to the funding that needs to come in.
The finger is being pointed at the United States, which accounts for about 2/3 of funding by governments globally. President Donald Trump's proposed budget reduces funding with the expectation that other donors can increase their commitments. The US currently spends over $6 billion a year to combat AIDS internationally, helping to buy anti-retrovirals for 11.5 million people in 60 countries. Experts say that the Trump administration's proposal to cut 1/5 of total anti-AIDS funding could lead to 1 million deaths or more, as well as increased infections. UNAIDS is warning shortfalls will hit the most vulnerable.
We are breaking the backbone of this epidemic, and it is a moment we should never let go. It is a moment for winning. It is not the moment for losing.
The International AIDS Society Conference continues in Paris till Wednesday.
2 months after Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari headed to London for medical treatment, the Nigerian government has released a photo of him. Since embarking on his second prolonged visit to the UK in a year, calls for Buhari to step down have been mounting, many arguing that a country facing an ongoing Islamist insurgency and the threat of famine needs its president at home. Buhari's office meanwhile insisting that he'll return to Nigeria as soon as his doctors give him the green light. Well, back in Nigeria, at least 8 people have been killed and some 15 more injured after female suicide bombers attacked 2 displaced persons camps in Maiduguri. Islamist extremists Boko Haram often target the major northeastern city, but these latest dual attacks mark the first time the camps have been targeted. Last year, the Nigerian government insisted that the group had been crushed, but the extremists have since carried out dozens of similar attacks in recent months, increasingly using women to carry out their bloodshed. South Africa's powerful Indian-born Gupta family has for years now been accused of infiltrating the corridors of power with the cooperation of President Zuma for their own financial gain. In June, a trove of leaked emails revealed the extent of what's been termed the Guptas' involvement in state capture, and a new website, Guptaleaks.com, launched by a trio of South African news organisations, aims to reveal the full extent of the family's push to wield undue influence. Well, earlier I spoke to Peter Louis Myberg, investigative journalist and author of The Republic of Gupta, A Story of State Capture. And I asked him how the Guptas came to be such an important family in South Africa.
The Guptaleaks, certainly isn't the first indication that we are given as to the power of this family. It certainly is a very shocking in terms of the scale of the state capture that's contained in these emails. But with the South African public have been aware of the family for quite a while. In 2013, they made news headlines when they landed a private aircraft at the Waterkloof Air Force Base, one of the key military facilities in South Africa. And since then, it's basically been a situation where, the dam wall increasingly started to break in terms of all these scandals around the family and the extent of the power and the hold that they have over the South African government, especially the office of President Jacob Zuma.
And now the family does have a lot of fingers and a lot of pies. They're involved in everything from cricket and newspapers to coal and uranium mining. Which activities are these allegations of corruption centred on, principally?
Yeah, so basically, this issue of state capture, at least as far as it concerns the Gupta family, it points to a long-term capture program or initiative that the Guptas have executed in South Africa. They have systematically gotten very close to the office of President Jacob Zuma, who in turn helped them to gain control of government-owned companies such as power utility Eskom, our state-owned rail operator Transnet, and Denel, which is the government-owned arms manufacturer. So when it comes to sort of the revelations around the cash flows that have now sort of made the headlines from the Guptaleaks, it's especially these major government-owned companies that are now linked to awarding very dubious-looking contracts to the Gupta family on an ongoing basis.
And for many in South Africa, there is no question that various members of the Gupta family have been involved in high-level state capture, but we're yet to see any convictions. Why is this?
I think it's basically because of the fact that state capture in the South African context at present doesn't end with the capturing of the highest office in the country or some of the state-owned companies that I mentioned earlier on. We are sitting in a situation, unfortunately, where our prosecuting authority, the National Prosecuting Authority, as well as the Hawks, which is South Africa's elite crime-busting unit, seem to be very lethargic when it comes to the investigation of any indication of corruption that involves high-level individuals. So over the years, with the myriad indications of state capture and corruption being pretty plentiful, one would think that the relevant authorities would pretty much have their pick in terms of where to begin to start prosecuting individuals. But we are sitting in a situation where there seems to be no appetite from the prosecuting authority to actually take seriously any of these indications of state capture and corruption.
Now, earlier this month, a Paris prosecutor asked a court to sentence Teodorin Obiang, the son of Equatorial Guinea's president, to 3 years in jail for spending taxpayers' money on luxury goods. And now a Swiss court is also looking into allegations he never paid an architect the €1 million he was owed. Nicolas Germain has this report.
In February 2012, French authorities seized the assets of a Paris mansion that belonged to Teodorin Obiang, the son of Equatorial Guinea's president. Obiang is accused of using public funds to buy luxury goods in France. The building is worth €150 million. Now Obiang is facing a Swiss court too. Swiss companies owned the building and the judges say the assets can be seized. This time it's because Obiang owes nearly €1 million to an architect. The architect had drawn plans for a vast palace in Equatorial Guinea that would have been half the size of the Château de Versailles.
Initially, of course, my client asked Mr. Obiang to pay the money he owed him. He answered curtly, nonchalantly, and rudely. He sent him packing. He categorically refused to discuss the matter.
This WhatsApp conversation dates from last year. The architect asks for his money. Obiang's response is quite clear. He adds, be careful. The decision by the Swiss court is more bad news for Equatorial Guinea. Earlier this month, a Paris prosecutor asked the court to sentence Obiang to 3 years in jail for embezzlement. But the nation's ambassador in Paris says all these trials are part of a plot against Obiang. He made a veiled threat.
I will tell you the truth. This is problematic. For the future of our relations with French businessmen working in Equatorial Guinea.
Equatorial Guinea says the Paris mansion belongs to the state, not to the president's son. But the French prosecutors, and now the Swiss courts, strongly disagree.
Well, that's all we have time for right now, but do stay tuned. There's more news coming right up.